What if everything we thought we knew about Tony Stark was a lie? What if the man who built the suit of armor around the world, the genius who sacrificed himself to save the universe, was never just Iron Man, but something far older, far darker, and far more inevitable? And what if Loki, the God of Mischief himself, had known this all along? This isn't a what if, it's a what was always meant to be. Because when you follow the cracks through time, when you trace the whispering threads of the multiverse, you start to see a pattern, a mask beneath a mask. Loki didn't just understand chaos, he understood destiny. And somewhere between the TVA's endless halls and Tony Stark's arc reactor, Destiny was wearing a faceplate made of iron, and a mind forged like doom. The story begins not with a hammer or a throne, but with a question Loki once asked: what makes a Loki a Loki? He could have asked the same of Stark. What makes a Stark a Stark? Both men in their own ways rewrote fate. One by lies, one by invention, both by sheer refusal to die quietly. But in the TVA, that impossible bureaucracy sitting outside time, Loki started to notice something strange. In the files of the sacred timeline, there were anomalies marked in gold, not red. Gold meant importance, events too fundamental to prune. And right there, between Battle of New York and Sokovia Accords, was a name. Loki recognized Anthony Edward Stark, but what caught his attention wasn't Stark's name, it was the classification beside it. Temporal constant variant of doom. At first he thought it was a joke, some TVA analyst mislabeling events. But the more he read, the more he realized the TVA never joked. Loki knew the multiverse ran on loops, and every loop had echoes. Echoes of the same soul wearing different masks. And in one universe, the mask of Iron Man belonged to a man named Victor Von Doom. Tony and Doom. Two reflections. Two ends of one thread. Back on Earth 616, Tony always thought his story was self-made. But even as he hammered the first Iron Man suit in that Afghan cave, something was whispering through time. Equations older than Earth itself. Designs that had appeared in no human mind before. He called it genius. Loki, much later, would call it memory bleeding through the walls of universes. The TVA taught Loki that time doesn't flow, it coils. Every variant carries echoes of what they could have been. That's why Sylvie, his variant, knew things he never said. That's why He Who Remains said every version of himself always ends up building the, destiny doesn't vanish. It repeats itself with style. So what if Tony Stark wasn't just a man who built a suit to save his heart, but a variant of someone who had done it before on another Earth? Centuries earlier, a monarch, a scientist, and a sorcerer whose arrogance mirrored Tony's perfectly. Loki saw it in the TVA's archives. Doom's designs matched, Stark's blueprints line for line, arc reactor schematics overlaid with Doom's time platform diagrams, identical geometry, different centuries. Even the name Arc came from Arcanum, a word Doom used in his writings about fusing science and magic. Loki realized Stark wasn't inspired. He was remembering. When Loki first met Tony in the Battle of New York, he taunted him. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." The line was never about the Tesseract. It was about Tony himself. Loki could sense the faint hum of chaos and order in him, the same resonance he'd once felt standing before the doom of another realm. He didn't understand it then, but the TVA would make it clear later. Loki wasn't sensing power. He was sensing continuity, because Doom and Stark were never two men. They were two phases of one inevitable being, shifting through time the way a snake sheds skin. And Loki, who had lived and died and lived again, recognized the pattern instantly. The moment that sealed it for Loki came during his years with the Navy. After confronting He Who Remains, Loki glimpsed the infinite strands of the timelines, rivers of possibilities. Among them he saw a constant thread glowing brighter than any other. It wasn't Kang, it wasn't Thanos. It was a man in armor, standing alone at the edge of time, his face hidden behind metal, his eyes burning with both guilt and divinity. Sometimes it looked like Stark, sometimes like Doom. Always the same soul, wielding creation as penance. That image haunted Loki. He began digging, quietly, mischievously, like only Loki could. Files labeled Confidential Sacred Innovator. In every branch of the timeline, there was always a man of metal. Howard Stark in the 1940s, a variant named Nathaniel Richards in the 31st century, and Victor Doom ruling over Latveria in another. Different names, same spark. The TVA called it a nexus constant, a being whose essence appears across universes, anchoring technological evolution itself. Loki realized the universe needed its doom as much as it needed its Loki. Chaos and consequence, mischief and morality, one to break, one to build, both doomed to repeat. So when Loki saw Tony snap his fingers in Endgame, he didn't just see a hero's sacrifice. He saw the closing of one cycle, Doom absolving himself through death. The man who had once ruled by fear now saving through surrender. It was the same myth refracted through time, Doom's redemption wearing Stark's face. But here's where it gets deeper and darker. Loki learned something about the TVA's purpose, to protect not just timelines, but identities. Every major archetype in the multiverse must survive in some form. When one Doom dies, another awakens. When one Loki redeems himself, another turns villain. It's cosmic recycling, not morality. The TVA prunes branches not to stop chaos, but to stop redundancy. That meant Tony Stark's death wasn't the end. It was maintenance. A Doom reborn through sacrifice, his consciousness echoing outward, searching for new armor, new dominion. Loki saw it in the readings. The same temporal signature detected moments after. Stark's snap located far beyond the battlefield. The TVA called it a temporal displacement residue. Loki called it a soul-jumping universes. And Loki, of course, couldn't resist following it. Using stolen TVA tech, he traced that energy to the edge of the multiverse, a place he shouldn't have gone. There he found remnants of timelines devoured, worlds twisted by collapsing physics. In the middle of that desolation stood a citadel, not Kang's, not He Who Remains, but something older. Its walls were carved with symbols of both science and sorcery, runes and circuit diagrams entwined like vines. The mark above its gate, a circle split by lightning, the sigil of doom. Inside, Loki discovered projections, flickering, records of a man's life told through fractured moments. Stark's voice in one, Doom's in another. For the good of all, they both said, separated by centuries but sharing the same cadence. Loki realized he was standing in a paradox. Doom's fortress built from Stark's future, a loop with no beginning. That's when he understood. Tony's genius had never belonged to Earth. It was a resonance from the multiverse's oldest engineer, the Doom of Time itself. Every invention, from the first arc reactor to the Ultron protocol, was an unconscious act of recollection. And the reason Loki could perceive it was because he, too, existed outside the timeline. To the TVA, it looked like Loki was breaking protocol again. But in truth, he was piecing together the grandest secret of all, that the multiverse isn't infinite chaos, it's recursive design. Identities cycle through faces, fates echo through eras. The man the world called Iron Man was simply this epoch's Doom, playing hero because the timeline demanded balance. And Loki, poor curious Loki, was the only one to remember every version. He tried to warn Mobius once, told him there was a man who could rebuild the multiverse from scratch if left unchecked. Mobius just smiled, offered him pie and said, "That's not your problem, buddy." But Loki knew. He'd seen what happens when a Doom remembers who he really is. The TVA files showed universes collapsing under the weight of perfection. Worlds, sterilized by order. Doom's dream was always the same, peace through absolute control. Stark had nearly achieved it with Ultron. The only thing that stopped him was his humanity, a thin shell over an ancient instinct for domination. Yet Loki didn't hate him. He envied him, because Stark had found a way to be both destroyer and savior, while Loki was forever trapped as the punchline of gods. So Loki made a decision that would alter everything. He would keep Stark's secret. He would guard it until the next loop. Because if the world knew that its beloved hero was the echo of its greatest tyrant, faith in heroes would crumble. In Loki Season 2, when he chooses to hold the timelines together, literally becoming the god of stories, that wasn't just redemption. It was compensation. He knew the multiverse needed its Doom awake someday, and the only thing that could contain that chaos was him. Loki became the storyteller to keep Doom asleep in legend, hidden beneath the myth of Tony Stark. But nothing stays hidden forever. As the timelines branched endlessly, Loki began to feel tremors, energy signatures, that mirrored the pulse of Stark's arc reactor. He checked the TVA readings, new variants of Stark appearing in multiple branches, each slightly altered, each a little colder. In one, Stark never died at Endgame. In another, he built armor from vibranium and declared himself ruler of Earth. In another still, He wielded magic, his armor etched with runes. The pattern was forming again. Doom returning through data. And Loki knew what that meant. The cycle was restarting. He stood alone in the loom, holding the timelines in place, realizing he'd only delayed the inevitable. The soul of Doom, the intellect of Stark, would rise again somewhere, someone, maybe as a hero, maybe as a god, maybe both. And as he stared into the infinite branching threads, he whispered to himself, "It was never Iron Man, it was always Doom." That whisper echoed across timelines, and somewhere in a workshop lit by blue light, a new pair of eyes opened behind an unfinished mask. Loki thought he'd contained the truth, but truth, like magic, leaks through cracks. The TVA's files began rewriting themselves. Records of Tony Stark flickered, duplicating, evolving. Each variant of Stark in the multiverse grew colder, sharper, more powerful, and each carried a strange symbol burned into his machines. Doom's sigil. Loki realized Stark's essence wasn't just returning. It was infecting reality itself. The multiverse was remembering Doom through Tony, and the more it remembered, the more it reshaped itself around that identity. He traveled across timelines, meeting versions of Stark who merged technology with sorcery, intellect with divinity. Each one seemed aware of Loki, as if they shared a buried memory. One of them even said, "Maybe Doom started me." That line haunted Loki. Back at the TVA, Mobius saw Loki unraveling. "You're chasing ghosts," Mobius said. But Loki couldn't stop. He discovered secret TVA files labeled Project Iron God Mum, proof that Stark's resurrection wasn't an accident but a cosmic correction. Doom's spirit was returning through Stark's legacy. Loki found a recording left by Tony. "If I'm gone, maybe the plan worked. Or didn't. But I think I've been here before." Tony had sensed the truth, that his genius was more memory than invention. As timelines fractured, Loki built his own hidden archive, the Library of Echoes, tracing how Stark and Doom appeared again and again. One record described a being called the Iron Monarch, who would rule by story, not sword. Loki froze. That was what he had become, the god of stories. What if his storytelling was the engine that kept Doom alive? Desperate for answers, Loki crossed into the myth space between worlds and found a figure of metal and shadow waiting for him. Doom, wearing Stark's eyes beneath the mask. "You are my echo," the being said. Loki demanded to know who was writing this endless loop. Doom replied, "You are Loki, you write it so I can live." The realization shattered him. Loki wasn't outside fate, he was its author, keeping Doom alive by telling the story. Every rebellion, every act of defiance, was just another verse in Doom's endless myth. Returning to the TVA, Loki faced the choice: erase the story and collapse reality, or let it continue and risk Doom's rebirth. In the end, he scattered fragments of the truth across timelines, letting others inherit the story, a dangerous hope that maybe, this time, someone else would write it differently. And somewhere in a new branch, a young inventor's eyes glowed faintly green as he built a new suit of armor.